Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. This episode I'd like to talk about reincarnation, trap, prison, or school. Before we get started real quick, just like to mention if you'd like to support the work of Astral Club and helping to spread the knowledge of astral projection throughout our world, you can help us on Patreon by supporting Astral Club there. And you get advanced videos on Sunday, and we can talk back and forth easily on Patreon. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the description. Next up, if you're interested in learning to astral project, I'd be glad to offer a lesson with me, which is individualized to your particular needs. And we can discuss your successes, failures, any fears, emotional blocks. We'll review various techniques, and we'll have guided meditations and other exercises that can help you get started astral projecting. Or if you have already astral projected, you can learn how to gain further control over your experiences and get more out of them and increase their frequency. If interested, you will find an email in the description where you can contact me for more information. Reincarnation. This is probably one of the most hot button topics that I have dealt with whenever I've mentioned it. And we have discussed it from time to time on this channel. Now, what does astral projection have to do with it? Well, I think certainly reincarnation is related to the topic of astral projection because we're talking about the movement of souls out of bodies, perhaps into other bodies. And astral projection, we're talking about having our soul matrix in our astral body moving outside of coincidence with our physical body. And one of the reasons why I have astral projected in the past was to gain knowledge about what'll come after when I leave this body. And I like to be prepared. I like to know what's coming ahead so that I can make sure that I'm optimized for whatever happens. I don't like being a strange person in a strange land. I like to land on my feet instead of flat on my face. And astral projection, I believe, helps you to gain knowledge so that you can take advantage of how to handle yourself when it's time to pass over. But before we even get any further, let's try to define reincarnation to make sure. I think everybody has a pretty good idea of what it is. Real briefly, it's the soul migrating from one body, physical body, to another physical body. In its simplest form, that's what reincarnation is. From a historical standpoint, I think the earliest textual reference to reincarnation appears in the Upanishads, which is the Sanskrit Hindu philosophy texts that were written sometime late in the Vedic period, which is circa 1100 to 500 BCE. The ancient Greeks and their Orphic mystery religion, that was really a loose type of mystery religion that had traveling Greek priests teaching lessons through song that was supposedly written, or these songs were written by a legendary musician, Orpheus. And in these songs, they would discuss the pre-existence of the soul, how it survived death, and that it would then reincarnate in a human or other mammalian body, eventually finding itself released from the cycle of birth and death and regaining a formerly pure state. Plato, the famous Greek philosopher in the 5th to 4th century BCE, believed in an immortal soul that participates in frequent incarnations. The Jews also had certain reincarnation beliefs in their mystery type sects. It has also been heavily inferred that early Christian texts, which I believe we've lost from the first century, because what we see in succeeding centuries AD are essentially copies of documents that we no longer have access to because they've been lost by history. At any rate, there is a strong belief that reincarnation was in the early Gospels, but it was removed. It was excised from those Gospels. I can only speculate as to why. I think it would have taken away the control that some of the early Christian leaders were looking to establish. If you're going to give the keys of heaven to a human, you want followers to believe that they had better do as you say, because if they only have one lifetime and they don't listen to you and your belief system, then they're going to be condemned forever after, and they're never going to have another shot. So reincarnation kind of undercuts that whole idea. So that's just my speculation as to why, if indeed the concept of reincarnation existed in early Christian texts, why it might have been removed, along with many other books that were removed from what you might call an early loose collection of Christian text. The Bible that we have today has been heavily edited. So, reincarnation. Some people see it as a trap, a prison, while others see it as a school. And people often find themselves in very extreme camps. As I said, I have received quite a bit of passionate response whenever I have discussed this particular topic. I look at it this way. When I was in school, I enjoyed school. I enjoyed the learning process. If I had any complaints about school, it was at times I thought they went a little slow, or that they belabored points that I thought were already well made. Let's move on. But, I understood that they had to make sure that everybody, or at least a median amount of the students, got the lesson before we could go forward. So that was really my only complaint. But I know there were others, and my brother was one of them, who was extremely bored in school and felt trapped. And he couldn't wait to get out and to go to work and just get out of this prison that he was forced to dwell in against his will. So here we have school, and I'm looking at it one way, whereas my brother's looking at it in a very different way, yet it's objectively the same experience. So one might easily say that school then is much like reincarnation, in that some people look upon it favorably as a chance to learn, while others see it as nothing more than a prison that they are forced to dwell in. I could imagine an alien who perhaps comes from a race that has a different way of educating, or perhaps in their race all of knowledge is passed down through some genetic process, or through some highly advanced pill that they take that automatically gives them all the knowledge they need. And I could see them coming down here and writing a report saying that On Earth, we have observed the humans imprisoning their young in buildings for long periods of time, forcing them to remain idle. And so here you go. Here's an alien looking at it from his perspective, and perhaps he would see it as this inhuman practice of forcing these vibrant young people to be trapped in this building for long periods of time. I recall one of my neighbors who had some sort of a learning disability, I believe. Of course, back in these days, there wasn't a lot of help for that in the public school system. We're going back now to the early to mid 70s. And he had to repeat the third grade, I believe, 3 times. I can only imagine what type of hell that must have been for him, having to go through the same lessons over and over and over again. Whereas for me, it was a breeze, just going through it and then moving on to the 4th grade. So here we are. There's another example of 2 different people going through the same experience, yet having very different emotions associated with that experience. When I'm criticized, it's funny. I have to laugh because some people vehemently attack me as if I'm somehow responsible for this tortuous wheel of reincarnation. Like it's my decision to create this whole process that I'm somehow forcing people to undergo for some sadistic purpose that no one can ever quite nail down. And I've been accused of a wide variety of things, including working for all kinds of evil forces, despite the fact that I've never received any checks in the mail from any forces, evil or otherwise. A lot of this, I think, goes back, if we're getting back into history, is Gnosticism. The Gnostic belief was that this planet, perhaps this reality, was created by a lesser god that was essentially evil, called the Demiurge. And that along with these governors, that you might want to call archons, he created this prison trap for some sort of sadistic purpose. And now we're all trapped here, undergoing this torture over and over and over again. And that's why we're all here, to undergo pain. Now, I find this, I have to disagree with this particular experience because I recall through my pre-life memories, which I have discussed in videos on this channel, I recall willingly coming here. I wasn't forced. No one forced me. I was given an opportunity to come back here so that I could assist others in a variety of ways, in my own small way. And I was given the right to pick my parents and to have these memories of this pre-life. So no one forced me to come back here. I came back here willingly. So it's hard for me to buy into this prison hypothesis because I guarantee you I'm as freedom-loving as the next person, and I would never voluntarily lock myself in a prison cell for someone's sadistic enjoyment. Is reincarnation something that we can't escape? Well, the Greeks and certainly the ancient Indian philosophers believed that if reincarnation was a wheel, it was possible certainly to escape it once one had ascended to a certain level of understanding. And the Buddha was very much on board with this philosophy as well. So if it's a prison, it's certainly one that you can earn your way out of. But certainly it seems to me more like a school, because one graduates from a school. One doesn't graduate from prison. So what are some of the ways or alternatives to a physical reincarnation on planet Earth, for instance? Well, there is a number of ones. You can ascend to the mental plane, which is a higher level of understanding. You can become a guide and help to guide others. You can also choose, and this does happen, though it is fairly infrequent based on my information. You can choose to reincarnate physically on another planet that has a higher level of evolution in the third dimensional plane. I once remember asking, when I was traveling and I met an intelligence, and I asked them, are there more evolved planets in our galaxy than Earth? And the answer was yes, thousands. I then asked, are there lesser developed planets than Earth? And the answer was yes, many thousands. And then I tried to get some sort of an idea as to where we stood on a scale of 0 to 10. And the answer that I got was that we were kind of on a physical 3D situation from evolutionary standpoint. We were a 3, maybe a 3.5. So there's a lot of folks out there on other planets that are more evolved, and there's a lot that are less. That 0 would be about as basic as an animalistic state as you can get, and the 10 is pretty much you're ready to, everybody there is ready to evolve to, the next dimensional state. So we're at a 3, maybe 3.5. I then remember asking, could I travel to a planet that was, third dimensional, but was much more evolved than here on Earth? When I appeared there, it at first was kind of hazy, and I realized that I had to adjust my astral vision and that I had to increase my own vibratory rate quite a bit so that things would clear up and they became sharper then. The colors are very vibrant. There was a lot of purples and there was a lot of blues. And the greens that I saw were very fluorescent type green. I was near a large body of water, and it was just a very peaceful and very loving sight. And a number of individuals approached me, and at first they didn't appear to be humanoid. But then as I sent greetings toward them and they sent them back, they took on a more humanoid shape, which I believe was obviously for my benefit. I introduced myself and they were very happy and also quite a bit surprised to see me, because they'd asked how I got there. They could see that I came from a planet that was a lot lower down on the evolutionary scale, and folks like myself didn't pop up every day. I told them that I'm an astral projector, and that this was just one of the places that I was privileged to visit, and if it was okay with them, I'd love to ask them some questions, and they could ask me questions if they liked. I asked them about themselves, and I said, I noticed that your physical appearance altered as you approached me. And they said, yes, that their natural appearance, at least the one that they evolved from, was very different from ours. But they thought it would make me much more comfortable if they assumed a shape that was more humanoid. And I thanked them for that. I asked them the nature, though, of their bodies because, first of all, they could see me. Secondly, I was having a hard time figuring it out because they didn't seem quite physical matter, but they didn't seem astral energy either. And they told me that they were a sort of hybrid mixture of both. They had physical matter, but they were also infused with energy, and that they could manipulate this level of physical matter versus energy at will, which is how they could perceive me. I asked them, did they live nearby? What type of shelters did they have? At first, they didn't quite get the concept, but then they, understood what I was trying to communicate, and they said, "Oh, that wasn't necessary here. The weather did change from time to time, but when it was what they considered pleasant, they would have a more physical balance in their makeup. In which case, they could then experience the sights and the sounds and the feeling that comes with the physical matter bodies. But when it became inclement, they would then take on a more energetic perspective, at which point it was neither here nor there because it didn't bother them. They then asked if they could ask me a question. I said, well, of course. And they asked me, did I consume things that had once been alive? And I had to admit that yes, I did. And before vegans start getting all proud of themselves, keep in mind that plants were once alive too. And so everybody on earth would have to answer yes to that question. And I felt a little shame. And they sent me some reassurance, but at the same time, I could feel a little shock. It would be the equivalent of if you met a cannibal and you wanted to try to be as polite as possible when you were asking them about their diet. And you didn't want to offend them, but at the same time, it was hard to conceal a feeling of shock and a little distaste. And I asked them, well, what did they consume? And they said that they didn't go through channels like we did. That's how they referred to it. In other words, energy comes from the outside, whether it's the sun or what have you. It goes into plants, and the animals eat the plants, and then we eat the animals and we eat the plants. They cut out the middleman. They absorb their energy directly from not only the sun, but also from the cosmos. They ingest it directly. So there is no need for any intermediaries. So they don't consume anything that was once alive, which I found extremely interesting and certainly made me feel a little savage. I then asked them whether they traveled throughout space. They said, yes, they have. They have, not only can they explore the galaxy and the universe using their pure spirit energy bodies, but they can also assume a more physical aspect. And they had ships that looked to me like cigars, which was interesting because I guess I was expecting the saucers. But no, they showed me a picture in their mind that it was essentially a cigar and that it used gravity waves in some way to propel itself. And that's really all I could understand about it. So, I could certainly talk more about that particular experience, but it gives you just one example of other alternatives out there. So, why do people come back here to Earth? Especially when there seems to be a lot of folks out there who find this particular planet distasteful. Well, I look at it this way. Let's say you're a regular guy, a regular American, average Joe American guy. You go to work 40 hours a week, you come home, you watch some TV, you have yourself a beer, maybe you have a hobby that you play around with a little bit, and then you go to sleep, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. Now, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But would that typical American feel comfortable in a quantum physics lecture? Would he feel comfortable attending some high society wine and cheese party? No, he wouldn't. Now, I'm not making any value judgments here. I'm just trying to make a point. No one forces us to go to that wine and cheese party. No one forces us to be Joe Six-Pack. No one is forcing you to do anything. But just like this average American, you would much rather, be watching the game on Sunday with your friends, having a beer and some chips. That's what you would enjoy, much more so than attending some highbrow lecture or going to some high society wine and cheese party. No one's forbidding you. No one is forcing you. It's just where you feel comfortable. And if where you feel comfortable is right here, then that's where you're going to be attracted. That's where you're going to come. And remember, the astral body decays. Once the physical body dies and the astral cord is severed, the clock starts ticking on the decay of the astral body. So you can only exist on the astral for X amount of time before you're going to be forced to make a decision. And the longer you put off making that decision, the worse it gets. It's just like putting off that long, huge term paper that you had a whole term to write, but you kept putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. So now you're at the night before and you're jamming to try to get it done. So if you're someone and that astral body is just decaying, your choices are becoming more and more limited. You don't fit into the mental. You're not someone who's going to be a guide. You're not someone who can go to a higher evolved planet because you're not going to fit in there. And you don't want to sink down to be amongst those poor souls in the sub-astral hell. So you're going to have to find a way to reincarnate. And you're going to have to select that body. And it's going to happen. Those are your choices, okay? And so it's something that you're going to have to do, whether you do it sooner or later. It's not up to me. It's not up to anyone else. It's a decision you have to make. Just like going to school, you have to do it. Now, you can make the best of it, or you could try to fight it tooth and nail. But let's face it, if you try to get out of school when you're 10 years old or 12 years old, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? Dig ditches? It's just not something that is really a realistic option. Now, I understand that this physical life can be extremely challenging, and it can certainly be unpleasant at times. I chose to be here, but I'm in a physical body, and it's aging, and I have pains in my joints, in my lower back, and it's not pleasant. So this isn't some sort of, ice cream sundae for me either. But rather than complain and bemoan my fate, I believe it's best to take this opportunity to learn and then to assist others. And with astral projection, it allows us all to progress forward, to give us an opportunity to learn from this experience and to gain knowledge from the next plane, to give us that advantage so that we have other options, that we can feel comfortable in other realities, so that our only option isn't to go back to the physical plane and try to relearn the lessons that we should have learned in the first place. I mean, you don't want to be that neighbor I had who went through third grade 3 times, do you? That's reincarnation. If you liked this video, please hit the like button, share it with those of like mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, hit that bell, because you want to be notified at Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. when that video comes out, and you want to be reminded when the Saturday morning 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time U.S. video comes out as well. And as always, I'm Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.